Good day. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Kalamata, Greece on June 27, 2026 for Reason to Resist. Joseph Aoun and Nawaf Salam, the Lebanese puppets of Washington, just entered into a framework agreement with Israel, an aggressor that is currently committing genocide in the country they were appointed to govern. Their treacherous agreement with the genocidal Israeli entity has provoked mass protests in Lebanon. Why? Well, because it authorizes Israel's genocide forces to remain on Lebanese territory for an indefinite period of time, which constitutes a flagrant violation of the first clause of the Memorandum of Understanding between the United States and Iran. In addition, after the Trump regime tried to circumvent Iranian control of the Strait of Hormuz by opening up a sea lane near the coast of Oman, Iran's military fired upon two vessels seeking to transit the strait without Iranian military approval. The U.S. responded predictably by bombing Iranian land-based targets yet again. Iran then retaliated by striking U.S. targets in the Persian Gulf. Can we now stop pretending that the U.S. will respect the Memorandum of Understanding with Iran and that this war is actually over? Because neither of those is true. In fact, both of those contentions are demonstrably false. In this report, I'll discuss all these developments and more. Before we begin, please remember to like and share this video if you find it to be informative. And if you're not already a subscriber to Reason to Resist, please do become one and help us to achieve our target of 200,000 subscribers by the end of the summer, which would mark the 2-year anniversary of the founding of our unapologetic resistance journalism platform. Now, let's get into it. Before I discuss the major events in the Persian Gulf and Lebanon, I want to talk to you briefly about three remarkable developments. The first is a stunning new poll out of Israel, one the likes of which I've never seen. Israelis were asked who had emerged as the winner in the war between Iran and the United States and Israel. Together, the two of them, by the way, have a military budget that is probably in the range of 20 to 30 times the Iranian military budget, not to mention that collectively they have a far larger population, far more territory, and far more resources at their disposal. Well, remarkably, 92% of Israelis believe Iran emerged as the winner after the war and the deal with the US. When did 92% of Israelis ever agree about anything other than perhaps mass murdering Palestinian children? One thing is clear, there is an almost unanimous belief within Israel amongst both its apparently Jewish citizens and non-Jewish citizens who are predominantly Palestinian that the United States and Israel lost this war. And that is going to have profound implications for the upcoming elections in Israel, which I believe are probably going to take place in September, and in particular for the genocidal baby killer Netanyahu. Not to suggest that the person who replaces him is likely to be any less genocidal, but there are two things about Netanyahu, I think, which have accrued to the benefit of Israel and its sadistic agenda. The first is that he looks, talks, and walks like an American. And I think that's actually a significant reason for his political success. Israelis understand that he has been able to make Americans, upon whose support Israel existentially depends, feel comfortable with Israel. And secondly, he has been extremely adept. Probably the one thing he's done well, other than massacring civilians or ordering his genocide forces to do so, is that he has been extremely adept at keeping coalitions together and bringing into them people whose core agendas are more or less similar to his own, but whose differences may nonetheless be significant. And he manages to, or at least has up until now, massage those differences and supervise them and keep the coalition together, which in Israel's fractious politics can be quite a challenge. So the departure of Netanyahu, even though it's not likely to, in fact, it's highly unlikely to result in someone ascending to the prime minister's office who has an ounce of conscience, But it's likely that that person is not going to be nearly as adept at manipulating American public opinion as at making Americans feel as though Israel is like them and Israelis are just part of their country. And in fact, whoever that person is who will replace Netanyahu is going to be operating in a much more challenging environment from a public relations perspective because of the horrors Israel has witnessed perpetrated with sadistic glee for almost 3 years now. And also, if whoever replaces Netanyahu, and it's looking very much, judging from this poll, that he's going to finally and mercifully be removed from office, whoever replaces him, if they don't have that ability to keep a coalition together, you could see Israel descend into a prolonged period of political instability, which could significantly weaken this already demoralized and detested entity. Now, the second thing I want to talk to you about is the way in which the Fédération Internationale du Football, des Associations du Football, or FIFA, has shamelessly robbed Iran's national football team in this World Cup. Now, just coincidentally, before I tell you about this, yesterday we published a report entitled The People's Game Has Been Stolen from the People, and in it we suggested that this was the worst World Cup in the history of World Cups. And as a World Cup aficionado, there's really only one sport that I watch at all, and it is football, European football, global football, not the American and Canadian version of football. You know, I've seen many a World Cup all the way back to the time when I was a kid, and I've never seen anything like this. This thing has turned into a complete and utter travesty, and that was the substance of our report. And shortly after we published our report, Iran played its third and final group match. If it had won that match, it would have automatically qualified for the round of 32, the first knockout round. And if it lost that match, it was likely not going to qualify. If it tied it, it was a question about whether or not it would qualify. And that question, by the way, remains open because, in fact, that's what happened. It tied Egypt. And there was a goal scored by Iran in the dying moments of that game. It was the score was 1-1. And in a highly controversial move, the referee, relying upon video assisted replay, overturned the goal. And this was, I believe, the third time in 3 matches that a referee has overturned a goal that was scored by Iran. And as a result, we now do not know whether Iran will end up advancing to the round of 32. Now, I've watched the replay. As I said, I not only am a fan of football, but I've also played football. I played semi-professionally. I played at the university level for nationally ranked teams when I was a young man. Fortunately, I wasn't good enough to become a professional player. I'm glad that that was the case in retrospect, although I dreamt of being one day when I was a young boy. But I really, you know, I've spent a lot of time around football. I understand the rules pretty well, and I've looked at the replay of this particular goal, and I can't for the life of me understand what the referees were thinking. And they've invoked some rule that I never even heard of before. It's so convoluted, I'm not even sure what the hell it means. But apparently they ruled that there was an offside on the Iranian side, and I looked at the replay and I just don't believe it. And you know, you don't have to take my word for it. You can just listen to what some of the most famous footballers in the world, or former footballers in the world, had to say about this travesty. One of them, he's not actually a footballer. I'm sure he did play at one point. He's currently the coach of Real Madrid, one of the most storied franchises in football history. His name is Jose Mourinho. And Mr. Mourinho said today, "For me, this is unacceptable. We spend millions on VAR, that's video assisted replay. We stop the game for minutes. We have every possible camera angle, and they still make a mistake like this. Tell me then, what is the purpose of the technology? This is not about a small decision. This is about a goal that could have changed the destiny of a team and the history of a nation at the World Cup. Mistakes like this are impossible to defend." And then there was Roy Keane, a famous Irish footballer, or former footballer, who captained another storied franchise, Manchester United. And he said, someone has to explain how that decision was reached because supporters deserve answers. If VAR can't provide fairness in moments like these, then it's failing at the one job it was brought into the game to do. And then finally, there was Thierry Henry, who was one of the greatest attackers of his time. He played, I believe it was for Arsenal in the Premier League and then for Barcelona, World Cup winner, and also a Champions League winner. And he said, this isn't just about Iran anymore. Every nation at the World Cup should be worried because if a moment like this can happen on football's biggest stage, it can happen to anyone. That's a frightening thought. Actually, I have to part company with him there. It can't happen to anyone. It can certainly happen to Iran. He goes on and he says, the officials will move on to the next game, but the Iranian players and their supporters will carry the moment for the rest of their lives. Some scars in football never truly heal. If that decision was wrong, then football has failed Iran. A World Cup should be remembered for unforgettable goals and heroic performances, not for a controversy that leaves millions wondering what might have been. I suspect that all three of these gentlemen are mincing their words because they don't want to get into too much hot water with FIFA, but those are nonetheless pretty strong sentiments. If the richly compensated glamazons who now dominate football had a conscience, and I'm referring here to the star players of this sport, I suggest to you that they would go on strike right now. And they would say, we refuse to play another match unless that goal is actually awarded to Iran and the points are given to the country. And it's not just, the goals that have been overturned, one in each match, but it's the disgraceful way in which the players have been treated by the fascist Trump regime, constantly being harassed at the border, being forced to leave the country, the United States in between matches and go to Mexico when they could just stay in one place and, and get rested for their next match. It really has been an absolute travesty. And that's just the half of it. I mean, have a look at our report about the World Cup, and we go on and we discuss a whole bunch of other things that have really made this a disgrace by the standards of the people's game. Now, the third thing I want to mention briefly is that yesterday, YouTube issued a warning to us for the very first time in our 2-year history. My comrade and removed a video, did so immediately upon its publication. The video was a report that my comrade Rami Yahya compiled a couple of days ago in South Lebanon. Rami is in Lebanon reporting from the ground, and I'm going to show you some video later on that he shot of these protests that happened yesterday. But he went down to South Lebanon at considerable risk to himself. It's still quite a dangerous environment, along with 2 Lebanese journalists. And he stood at a lookout point that was about 7 kilometers from a strategically important hill called Ali Tahir. And he talked with these 2 Lebanese journalists about how the Israelis had continuously attempted to take that hill in the dying days of this latest chapter in its genocide in Lebanon. That genocide's not over, and I don't mean to suggest that at all. But in any case, they failed in that attempt, 6 attempts, I believe. And he was describing what it took for the resistance to defeat those attempts of a much better equipped military. And apparently that was too much for the YouTube censors. So we have published that video on Rumble, and I'm not going to repeat the title of it because if I do, they might nix this video as well. But in any case, I thought this was a good opportunity for me to remind people that as a backup plan, we publish all of our videos on Rumble. We've been doing that now really almost from the founding of our channel. So I do encourage you, even if you're not a regular Rumble user, and even if you prefer to watch our videos on Rumble, that you subscribe to our Rumble channel. It's free. And that way, if for any reason we suddenly disappear one day from YouTube, you'll know where to find our work. We've not ever had any strikes issued against us. This is the first time we received a warning of this nature. Hopefully it's a one-off. It won't happen again, and it's not a sign of things to come. That is our hope. But do please subscribe to our Rumble channel. Well, with that, I would like to turn then to these extremely important developments in Lebanon and in the Persian Gulf in the last 48 hours. So yesterday, as many of you will have heard, in Washington, representatives of the Lebanese national government and the genocidal, sadistic Israeli child murdering entity entered into something called a framework agreement. And initially, they didn't publish the details of it, but subsequent to the signing ceremony, after some delay, they did publish it. And here is a picture of the ne'er-do-wells who participated in the signing ceremony. This is an article, I believe, from, this was a picture from Agence France-Presse. And what I found quite interesting from this, you can see on the left-hand side, sitting down, is the Israeli war criminal. Then there's an American war criminal in between them. And then there is a Lebanese puppet of Washington sitting on the right. What really struck me as soon as I looked at this is that there's not a single person smiling in that photo. Nobody is even pretending to smile, trying to, work up a fake smile. Normally, when you enter into an agreement, which is supposed to be bringing a war to an end and bringing peace to a region, that would be, a pretty good reason to smile from ear to ear. But none of these characters could so much as muster a grin. And when you look at the terms of this thing, I think you'll understand why. What does this framework actually say? Let's go, first of all, to these provisions of the framework. These are Articles 2 and 3. And it states, the government of Israel and Lebanon commit to a reciprocal sequence process with clear conditions whereby the Lebanese armed forces will restore effective sovereign authority over all Lebanese territory pending the verified disarmament of non-state armed groups and dismantlement of associated infrastructure, enabling the Israeli Defense Forces to progressively redeploy out of the Lebanese territory. Notice the word they use, enabling, as though the Israelis want to go, but they can't. They have to be enabled to go. They're here. They don't want to be here. They're forced to do so because of circumstances. And what are the circumstances? The circumstances is that there are people in the south of Lebanon who actually have light weapons relative to the Israeli weapons, and are able to inflict casualties on the invading terrorists. And it is now being demanded and it's been formalized in this agreement that they can stay until the people that they are mass murdering, the people against whom they are perpetrating ethnic cleansing and a genocide, have been divested of their light weapons. I cannot stress enough, and I've said this many times, it is difficult for me to imagine something more perverse, something more deranged, something more evil than the notion that the people who are being subjected to crimes against humanity, including genocide, must be deprived of their light weapons, but the perpetrator of those crimes against humanity, the genocidal regime that is mass murdering them, killing their children, destroying their homes, their schools, their hospitals, can remain armed to the teeth. I mean, I think you really have to be from some kind of dark, sinister moral universe in order for you to think that that makes any sense whatsoever. What we should be talking about here, whether you're talking about the Lebanese resistance or any other resistance group, is first and foremost the disarmament of Israel. Israel should be divested of all of its weapons, and only then should anybody even begin to have a conversation about the much more lightly armed resistance groups being deprived of their weapons. And yet in the Western discourse, in the corporate media, and amongst the political elites of every Western country, their overarching priority, which they repeat ad nauseum, is that all groups engaged in armed resistance against Israel must be completely disarmed and left utterly vulnerable to these diabolical monsters. That is the quality or lack thereof of the leadership in the West today and the corporate media. Truly, truly perverse and sinister a notion. Now, the thing that I think, quite apart from that, which is the most important point I want to make about this, the other thing I think you need to take away from this is the clear implication is Israel can stay until there's no armed resistance. Now, do you think Israel's going to go once the civilian population, the people who live in this region or who used to, are not able to inflict any casualties upon the occupying army? Do you think then they're going to get up and go, or do you think they're more likely to go to leave if they are being subjected to resistance and are suffering casualties? It seems to me quite clear that it's in the latter scenario that they are more likely to depart. And that is exactly what drove them from Lebanon on two prior occasions. It was the fact that they were suffering casualties. It wasn't the fact that their victims were completely divested of their light weapons. So essentially what the Lebanese government, and I think it's generous to call it that, has done here is it has given Israel a green light to remain in Lebanon until the resistance has been disarmed, which is just not going to happen. Simply not going to happen. And even if the Lebanese army were to try to make it happen, it would simply cause the country to descend into civil war. And in fact, many of the people who serve in the Lebanese army are very sympathetic to the resistance. And so the government, again, I hesitate to call it that, of Lebanon could find itself in quite a quandary. And I would suggest that they may want to think twice about going down this path. I'm sure they're reluctant to do it, but it appears that they may be about to capitulate to the immense pressure that the United States, Western states, and Israel have put on these weak, spineless puppets to try to force the issue with the resistance groups in Lebanon. That would be a true catastrophe for all the people of the country, including, in particularly, Joseph Aoun and Nawaf Salam. Now, this third article of this framework says, pursuant to the security annex, which is something they're going to, negotiate later. We haven't seen it. At least I don't believe anything like this has been published, and that remains to be worked out. The LAF, the Lebanese Armed Forces, will gradually assume full and effective security responsibility in pilot zones. So they, as I understand it, picked a couple of small areas that Israel currently occupies, and that its military doesn't think is essential for it to hold. And they're going to let, on a provisional basis, the Lebanese armed forces go in there and take control. Of course, if the Lebanese armed forces, in Israel's judgment, which is oftentimes completely erroneous, doesn't disarm whatever resistance fighters may be in those two pilot zones, then likely the genocidal Israeli military would go back in. But why are they doing this? They're doing this to create the perception of a withdrawal. That's why they're doing this. They picked a couple of small chunks of land that Israel doesn't care about, that Israel currently occupies. They're going to have the Lebanese armed forces go in there, and then they're going to say, oh, we've actually begun the withdrawal. But the parts of the occupation zone that they care about, they ain't going to leave. And they will not leave. And frankly, as I said, even if you were to divest all resistance groups within Lebanon of all their weapons, they almost certainly would not leave. That would simply encourage them to remain and to annex the territory outright, because then they would have to pay no price at all for the occupation. Certainly no Western government is going to inflict a price upon them. Has it inflicted any price upon them for occupying the West Bank, for occupying Gaza? Zero penalty. So they know that once they are immune to casualties, their military forces are immune to casualties, they will pay no penalty for remaining. So why the hell would they leave? Now let's take a look at another set of articles. These are articles 4 to 6. The government of Lebanon reaffirms its resolute and irreversible commitment to restoring and exercising full sovereignty over all its territory, blah, blah, blah. It will rebuild the state's monopoly on the use of force, achieve the complete and verified disarmament of all non-state armed groups, and ensure that such groups will have no military or security role and no armed capabilities anywhere in Lebanon. So at least on paper, they appear to be serious. And then it says, the government of Lebanon herewith requests the support of international, particularly Arab partners under the leadership of the United States to achieve this outcome. Let's recall that Donald Trump has been openly calling upon the Syrian dictator, the former al-Qaeda honcho, al-Jolani, to send his mercenaries into Lebanon to do the dirty work that Israel has not been able to do, namely the disarmament of the resistance. So this language could potentially, certainly could be interpreted as a green light to the head choppers in Damascus to send in their mercenaries into Lebanon. Because after all, al-Jolani is an Arab partner of Washington, and now holds himself out as a friend of the Lebanese government. I think it is the height of irresponsibility. It is frankly high treason and utterly disgusting that the Lebanese government would accede to language which could be interpreted as a green light to al-Jilani to send in his murderous mercenaries to wage war on Lebanese soil, a country that is already devastated by the genocidal rampage of Israel. The next paragraph, paragraph 5, says, the government of Israel stresses that its military actions in Lebanon are solely a consequence of the attacks, threat posed by and hostile intent of non-state armed groups, particularly Hezbollah. Solely a consequence. Again, unbelievable that the Lebanese government would put its signature on a document which contains so flagrant a lie. It is well understood and oftentimes openly stated by the more extreme elements in Netanyahu's government that they want to take South Lebanon and make it part of Greater Israel. They covet that land. It's fertile. They want to have the water resources of the Litani River. It undoubtedly has other resources, mineral resources, and so forth that they'd like to get their grubby paws upon. There's no question that the Israeli political elite fantasizes about Greater Israel and that Lebanon has already been part of that plan. So again, the Lebanese government is lying through its teeth, implicitly at least, by putting its signature on a document which contains this brazen falsehood. And then Clause 6 says, the government of Lebanon, in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations and exercise of its sovereign authority, reaffirms that its security forces hold exclusive responsibility for Lebanon's security and defense, and that the government of Lebanon holds the exclusive sovereign authority to make war and peace. The government of Lebanon and its army have done absolutely nothing to defend Lebanon against Israel. Nothing. And let me tell you how bad it is. When I was last in Lebanon about 2 weeks ago, and we were going around the south, trying to document as best we could with the bombs going off, the drones overhead, Israel's crimes against the civilian population. And this was one day after Lebanon and Israel signed another agreement, a ceasefire agreement, which Israel violated on every subsequent day. Israel killed it in a drone strike a brigadier general of the Lebanese army who's a Sunni, a captain in the Lebanese army who's a Christian, and a private in the Lebanese army who was a Shia. You could call it a non-discriminatory atrocity. And they did this by blowing up a vehicle that they were driving in South Lebanon. And the brigadier general was actually responsible for coordinating between the Lebanese forces and the Israeli forces to avoid any, unnecessary conflicts between them. Israel knew well who this person was. They were very familiar with him. They probably were tracking his whereabouts. They murdered him. And what did the Lebanese army do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. There was absolutely no retaliation whatsoever. And so we're to believe under Clause 6 of this piece of toilet paper that the Lebanese government is prepared to assume exclusive responsibility for Lebanon's security and defense. Please. Two more provisions, or two or three quickly, I want to show you. Paragraph 11, Lebanon and the United States commit to preventing funds from flowing to any entity, organization, or individual affiliated with non-state armed groups, and to take available legal measures to prescribe the activity of any such entity, organization, or individual. The government of Lebanon explicitly commits to prevent reconstruction funds from flowing to non-state armed groups and connected entities. This is really an absolute humdinger of a travesty. It is well known that the Iranians stand ready to provide significant sums of money, even though they themselves have been subjected to extreme economic privation by the criminal sanctions of the United States and its vassals. And the funds that it is prepared to provide to Hezbollah to redistribute to families who have been displaced, whose homes have been destroyed or damaged, would go a long way to rehabilitating the regions that Israel has tried to ethnically cleanse. Lebanon doesn't have that money. The Lebanese government can't reconstruct the South anytime soon, even assuming that Israel's military forces just would be willing to get up and leave, which obviously they're not prepared to do. And so why, for the love of God, would the Lebanese government agree to prevent Iran from, or any country from providing funding that will help to redevelop the South or any part of Lebanon that has been severely damaged. It just goes to show you whose interests Aoun and Nawaf Salam actually serve. It sure as hell ain't the people of Lebanon. Now, the last provision I want to show you of this, again, I forgive my crudity, but I can't restrain myself. Toilet paper. Actually, this is the second last one. In line with their shared goals, this is clause 13. Their shared goals to establish stable and peaceful relations. Israel and Lebanon commit to take good faith measures that demonstrate positive intent, including the cessation of all hostile or adverse actions in international political or legal fora, and pledge to work towards the search for and return of remains and the release of detainees. Now, legal fora. This treacherous fool, Nawaf Salam, who is now the prime minister, you know what he did before he was the prime minister? He was the president of the International Court of Justice. And in that capacity in 2025, I believe it was, or it might have been 2024, he signed an opinion issued by the International Court of Justice at the request of the General Assembly on the question of whether Israel's occupation of Palestinian territory was illegal. And he concurred with the vast majority of the judges that in fact was illegal. And the decision pretty much went as far as accusing Israel of committing genocide. You know, the Lebanese, I'm pretty sure Lebanon is a signatory to the International Criminal Court. It certainly is part of the UN Charter and could bring a complaint against the state of Israel in their International Court of Justice. What the Lebanese government has just done is it has surrendered its right to file any kind of complaint with any legal body whatsoever, whether it's the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, some Nuremberg-style tribunal, some domestic court, even its own domestic courts against Israel. And as I read this, you know, quite possibly Israeli individuals and corporations for no good reason whatsoever. They didn't, to give up their legal rights, they didn't even secure a withdrawal of Israeli forces from their territory. They didn't even get a deadline for the withdrawal of Israeli forces for the security. They got absolutely nothing in exchange for surrendering their right to have recourse to courts of law at the international domestic level to achieve justice. So basically, Lebanon saying, the government, we aren't going to resist you by means of weapons, and we're not going to resist you by means of litigation either. We're not going to use nonviolent methods to resist you. We're just basically going to lay down and let you take our country. That's effectively what this framework agreement is. And the last provision I want to share with you, 14, the two governments acknowledge the role of the United States in supporting their efforts to end decades of conflict and establish lasting stability and comprehensive peace between the two countries. My God, the dishonesty in this document just jumps off the page at you. So hard that it like slaps you upside the head. It is so outrageous, the things that they say in this document. They actually say that they express their deep appreciation for the vision and leadership of Donald J. Trump. The Lebanese government did that. The Lebanese government said that about a state that has been arming Israel to the teeth and enabling it to commit a genocide, not only against Palestinians, but against Lebanon itself. Now, the other thing I want to note about this clause is the express acknowledgement of the important role that the United States played in this agreement. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. This is very clearly not something that Israel and Lebanon went off and negotiated on their own. No, the United States government was at the core of this entire enterprise, supervised the entire process, and probably even to a degree dictated the terms to the two sides, because after all, both the Israeli and Lebanese governments are vassals of Washington. So we'll come back to the significance of the U.S. role in this travesty in a moment. Now, for perfectly compelling reasons, tens of thousands of Lebanese took to the streets last night, especially in Beirut, to protest against this shocking betrayal of the Lebanese national interest by Nawaf Salam and Joseph Aoun. And here is one video of many that my comrade Rami Yahya, who is in Beirut and was at those protests yesterday, that he shot during the evening. Tomorrow, by the way, we will be holding a live stream. That's Sunday, June 28th, during which Rami will show you more footage from the protests and tell you about some interesting interactions he had with security officials during those protests last night. Now, arguably the most absurd aspect of this framework agreement, as they call it, is that only 3 days ago, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun boldly declared that he would accept nothing less than an end to the Israeli occupation of Lebanon. This is an excerpt from an article in the Jerusalem Post published earlier this week, before this agreement was signed, and as they were making progress toward the conclusion of a framework agreement. And you'll see in the last paragraph here, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun said that his government would, quote, accept nothing less than the end of the Israeli occupation in southern Lebanon. Well, Aoun just accepted a hell of a lot less than an end to the Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon. On the contrary, he has in fact green-lighted effectively an indefinite Israeli occupation of the south of the country. So how did the Israelis react to this gift? Well, of course, what else would the Israelis do? They bombed Lebanon again. And here is a video of them doing just that in the south of the country. So yes, my friends, like all ceasefire agreements that Israel has ever signed, this one too, well, they call it a framework agreement, not a ceasefire agreement, but whatever. This one too, they are treating unceremoniously like cheap toilet paper. And this is, in fact, if you add this, it is an agreement, even though they don't call it a ceasefire agreement. It is an agreement which calls for a cessation of military operations. This is, in fact, the fifth one pertaining to Lebanon that the Israelis have signed on to, or that the United States government has signed on to on behalf of itself in Israel since November 2024. There are 5 separate, what are effectively ceasefire agreements, in effect governing Lebanon right now, and Israel's violating them all. This must be the only country in the history of humanity that has managed to violate 5 separate ceasefire agreements in one country at the same time. Truly a glorious distinction, if ever there was one. Now, this framework agreement does at least clarify one thing, and in that respect, I suppose it's helpful, and that is that Trump has no intention whatsoever of forcing Israel to withdraw from Lebanon, and he is therefore violating Article 1 of the MOU with Iran. Now, I'm going to show you Article 1 in just a second, but this is why I stressed a few minutes ago that Washington played a crucial role in this agreement. Washington wants this agreement. In fact, you saw in that photograph I showed you, there was a U.S. representative sitting between the Lebanese representative and the Israeli representative, and all 3 of them were signing the agreement. Washington is actually a signatory to an agreement which allows Israel to remain on Lebanese soil indefinitely. So this is what Article 1 of the Memorandum of Understanding with Iran says. It says the U.S. and the Islamic Republic of Iran and their allies in the current war, by signing this MOU, declare the immediate and permanent termination of military operation on all fronts, including Lebanon, and undertake from now on not to initiate any war or any military operation against each other, and to refrain from the threat or use of force against each other, and ensuring the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon. Stating in writing that you intend to indefinitely occupy a country, a sovereign country, which is what Israel has done and the United States has done. It's endorsed that Israel is going to do that until the people who live in that land and whose land is being occupied have no ability to resist the occupation of their land. You can't imagine a more profound violation of the territorial integrity. I guess you could. I mean, I guess a formal annexation of South Lebanon with U.S. approval would be worse than this. But this is probably like the second worst conceivable violation of this provision of the MOU. There is no way in hell that the U.S. government is going to respect the territorial integrity of Lebanon or require its Israeli attack dog to do so unless and until it has been subjected to a far higher level of pain, whether it be in the form of military action, economic action, in the form of political repercussions. For example, the Republicans getting annihilated in the midterms and being replaced by Democrats who actually do want to put a stop to this catastrophic war. Until something like that, much more dramatic than what we have seen thus far, happens, Trump clearly, unambiguously intends to flout this provision by crapping all over the territorial integrity of Lebanon. That's just obvious at this stage, painfully obvious in my view. This brings me to the Strait of Hormuz and the renewed violence there. A couple of days ago, Iran's military determined that some ships were transiting the Strait of Hormuz without its permission. And it responded to that discovery by issuing a warning to all ships in the vicinity. And here is that warning.
All vessels, attention all vessels, attention all vessels in Persian Gulf and Oman Sea. This is SEPA Navy warning. Transiting in the Strait of Hormuz is only possible with SEPA Navy permission and on designated routes. If any vessel attempts to transit in the strait without our permission or AIS off or outside of the designated route, it's responsible for any consequences of any danger. This is SEPA Navy out.
Now, apparently some kamikazes decided to disregard this warning, which prompted the Iranian military to attack two vessels that attempted to transit the Strait of Hormuz without the permission of the Iranian military. The second of those vessels was actually struck today. This is a warning issued by the UK Maritime Trade Operations today at approximately 800 UTC. The UK MTO has received a report of an incident within the Strait of Hormuz. The master of tanker has reported being struck by an unidentified projectile. The vessel sustained damage to their bridge. All crew are reported safe. No environmental damage reported at present. Vessels are advised to transit with caution or report any suspicious activity to UK MTO. Authorities are investigating. So I don't know that the Iranians have officially acknowledged they did this, but I think it's likely that they did. It came in the context of a warning. They take very, very seriously, and for perfectly understandable reasons, their control over the Strait of Hormuz. It is the best protection they have against U.S. and Israeli aggression and the destruction of their country. No responsible government that was faced with the existential threats confronting Iran would give up control of the Strait of Hormuz when that was by far the most effective means to protect itself and its people. No responsible government. And as I've said, the Iranians do have, I explained this in another episode, they do have plausible legal arguments, that what they have done in the course of this war in the Strait of Hormuz has been in compliance with the applicable principles of international law. Now, when Iran did what you would expect it to do, given the threats confronting it and the importance of its control over the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. military reacted predictably and bombed military targets, what it claimed to be military or perhaps dual-use civilian infrastructure on the southern coast of Iran. And just to make sure that people believed it was serious, the U.S. military put out a video of what it claimed was one of those airstrikes. And here's that video. Now, I don't know about you folks. I'm just going to show the beginning of this again, but uh, that could be, for all we know, some bomb that they dropped in a desert in Nevada or some open space, in some deserted part of Iran or some other place. Who knows? This does not show. I can't discern. Maybe some professional, military analyst could figure it out, but I can't discern anything in this image which looks like or something that might be an object that was worth hitting. It just looks to me like an open space. I mean, those black lines seem to be roads. So let's just watch this again. I see no buildings there. I can't make out any kind of military infrastructure. It just looks like they hit an open space between two roads. In any case, the significance of this video is not that it proves the prowess of the U.S. military. And by the way, I think it's the Wall Street Journal has just put out another report about how mercilessly the Iranians pummeled the U.S. naval base and military facilities in Bahrain. You should check that out if you want to figure out just how bad the damage actually is. But I don't see any evidence here that they actually accomplished anything with that strike. But they did actually. They're not hiding the fact that they bombed. At least that's their claim. They bombed, targets on Iranian territory. Iran didn't do that. Iran didn't attack U.S. Territory. That was not. This is an escalatory response because they attacked a ship, and as you saw, they didn't kill anybody. They didn't sink the ship. They didn't cause a rupture, some major oil spill in the Strait of Hormuz, which would be profoundly contrary to their own interests. They didn't do anything like that. In fact, it seems like they quite skillfully just inflicted some damage without, causing any casualties or sinking the vessel, to send a message that they weren't going to tolerate anybody going through the Strait of Hormuz. And the United States considered an appropriate response to be bombing targets on Iranian territory. That was clearly an escalatory move. Whatever it is they may have struck, they raised the stakes, the U.S. military. So what did Iran do? It raised the stakes, and it pummeled at least one U.S. military base. It was, again, Bahrain, which has taken a big beating. And you'll see, even though they've destroyed much of that military base, a good bit of it still remains standing. It's a big military facility. It's a juicy target. So the Americans, by attacking Iranian territory, have basically ensured that the Iranians were going to strike their military base. And how do we know that they struck? Well, the Iranians said that they struck multiple targets in the Persian Gulf in response and retaliation to the strike on their territory. And then the Bahraini dictatorship issued a bitter complaint about this. And according to the Cradle, they said today that their territory, that's what they said, was targeted by an early morning drone strike, which it condemned as a flagrant violation of its sovereignty and international law. A statement from the Bahraini Foreign Ministry claimed the operation involved a number of drones, though officials did not disclose the exact locations targeted or the extent of any damage. Why didn't they disclose anything about the locations? You know why? Because the Iranians targeted a U.S. military base. It's not like they targeted some government office or, some civilian infrastructure outside of the military base. They targeted the military base. If the Bahrainis don't want any part of their territory to be targeted by Iran, well, they should tell the Americans to get the hell out and stop threatening Iran. But instead, they allow their territory to be used to threaten Iran and facilitate attacks on Iran. And then they have the gall to complain when the military base, which they could demand be removed from their territory, is struck by the Iranians in retaliation for an attack on their own territory. Really, the chutzpah of these people knows no bounds. And by the way, international law, are you kidding me? The Bahraini dictatorship is one of the most vicious human rights abusers on earth. What possible credibility do they have when it comes to questions of international law? So where does all of this leave us, my friends? Well, for one thing, traffic in the Strait of Hormuz has again slowed to a trickle. And just before I started this report, I went to the ever helpful marinetraffic.com website, which shows in real time marine traffic conditions all around the world. You can zoom in and you can see the Strait of Hormuz. That's what I did. And this is what I saw. You can see a whole bunch of vessels clustered on the Persian Gulf side of the Strait of Hormuz, and a whole bunch of vessels clustered on the Sea of Oman side of the Strait of Hormuz. But going through the strait, you see 4 red arrows and heading into the Persian Gulf, and you see one large green arrow, and it looks like 2 small green arrows, small ships going out. So I count, and there also is a small red one. So by my count, there were 8 vessels, 4 of them, or 3 of them, I should say, very small, transiting the Strait of Hormuz at the time that I began this report. You'll see a whole bunch of green dots. You'll see they're circles, they're not arrows, clustered around Keshem Island. That's that big island in the Strait of Hormuz. That's where I was actually in late March, not on the island, but I was in Bandar Abbas, which is just above Keshem Island. You can see it there in the upper half in the center of this image. And what I saw, as I documented at the time, was a whole lot of vessels, tankers, and cargo ships just anchored between that island and Bandar Abbas. And so it appears that it's relatively speaking a safe harbor for vessels during this time of war. So those green dots, these are not vessels that are going anywhere. And I would imagine that they've been there for some time. And the other thing I want to point out here is that those 8 vessels, 3 of which are quite small, probably some, who knows, maybe even all, are Iranian. So in any case, this is a very small proportion of the pre-war traffic. And one thing I want to stress here, I've said it before, I think it bears repeating, is that even if Iran doesn't, go any further than it's already gone in this latest round of escalation to deter vessels from going through the Strait of Hormuz without its consent, all of this brouhaha, the warning, then the defiance of the warning, then 2 ships struck, then the United States strikes land targets in southern Iran. Iran retaliates by striking the U.S. naval base in Bahrain, and who knows, perhaps other American military facilities in the region. The world is watching carefully. The shipping companies are watching very carefully. The insurers are watching very carefully. Governments around the world see all of this happening, and they become concerned that this is not a safe area for these ships to operate. It's just not a safe area. At any time, this is just goes to drive home what we saw over the last 24 to 48 hours. At any time, this could break out into a hot war. And so when you have these slow-moving ships transiting through this long strait in such a volatile set of conditions, so unpredictable, you're going to think long and hard about sending your vessels in those straits. And some operators in the maritime transportation industry might just say, look, this is well above my risk appetite. I'm done. I'm done with operating in the Strait of Hormuz. And we may never see the level of maritime traffic, cargo ships and tankers going through the Strait of Hormuz that was normal prior to the war. But one thing's for sure, what's happened over the last 48 hours is going to delay even further a recovery in maritime traffic in the Strait of Hormuz, and that is going to have obviously negative consequences for the global economy. So, my friends, I think one thing we can take away from all of this is that we should finally, as I've been imploring people to do, dispense with the crazy suggestion that Trump intends to comply with this memorandum of understanding. He is flagrantly violating the territorial integrity of Lebanon. My understanding is that they still haven't unfrozen any of the Iranian assets and handed them over to Iran. They are bombing Iran. They are trying to take control of the Strait of Hormuz away from Iran. And I think the obvious reason that they're doing that is because if they can get control of the Strait of Hormuz, they're using the ceasefire effectively as a cover operation to get the Strait of Hormuz under their control, because they couldn't do that in times of war. And they're trying to effectively eliminate Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz, because the control over the Strait of Hormuz allows Iran to impose a penalty on Trump when Trump violates the MOU. So what you see happening in the Strait of Hormuz, what the U.S. is trying to do there is, in essence, immunize itself from the consequences of violating the memorandum of understanding. That's what's right, because the Strait of Hormuz is the way Iran imposes a penalty. So please, let us dispense with the idea that Trump is going to respect the memorandum of understanding. This war is not even close to being over. I don't know what's going to happen now. There may be a period of quiet. By the way, Trump waited until the markets closed to bomb Iran. The first of those vessels that was struck, I believe it was on Thursday. He waited until markets closed yesterday, Friday, before he bombed Iran. He was strangely quiet until then. I would imagine that between now and Monday morning, when the markets reopen, Trump is going to make all kinds of reassuring noises about how the ceasefire is still in effect, and this was just a little brouhaha, and it's not going to affect the overall trajectory of the peace negotiations. People have calmed down. That kind of reassuring language, and very likely that we're going to hear something like that between now and Monday morning. But the war ain't over. When people are being killed in Lebanon, as they are, by Israel with United States support, military, political, economic support. People are being massacred in Palestine, which is the first front of all the fronts that make up this war, and the one in which Israel has committed the most heinous of crimes. And the Americans aren't unfreezing the assets of Iran. And they're making noises about, as Trump did in a recent press conference, of requiring Iran to engage in no new uranium enrichment at all, none, which Iran has consistently refused to do. I don't know how people can actually think that this agreement is going to be respected by Donald Trump. I think the best case scenario is that we see a very low-level war until the midterms, because Trump doesn't want the U.S. economy to blow up. Before then, 78% of Americans, in a recent CBS poll, as I mentioned in a couple of programs ago, 78% want to see this war brought to an end. So if Trump goes back to the kind of warfare, the kind of disastrous conditions we saw in the Persian Gulf, between now and the midterms, he would be effectively committing political suicide. So I think he has a strong incentive to try to keep things reasonably calm, wage war against Iran at a low level, try and get as much oil as possible into the market to keep the price of oil and gas down in the United States. But at any time, this could blow up. And I think there is a strong likelihood that once the midterms are over, Trump is going to resume the hot war. In any case, this is my report for today, June 27th, 2026. Please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you tomorrow during our live stream.